Hello, friends. Welcome to the Deadology Podcast. I'm your host, Howard Weiner. Today is September 6th, and tomorrow will be the 50th anniversary of the Grateful Dead's scintillating show in the Nassau Coliseum on September 7th, 1973. I first came across that show. I heard The Eyes of the World from that show, which was a bonus selection on the Wake of the Flood reissue CD. And also, it was the first performance of Let It Grow that night. And only in the last year or two have I really had a chance to soak in how great that show was. So that's going to be the main focus of episode 6 here on the Deadology Podcast. And before we dive into that incredible performance, let's take a look at the history of the Nassau Coliseum and the Grateful Dead's history in that building in Uniondale, New York, Long Island. Much to my amazement, I thought the Grateful Dead, if I had to take a guess, I thought they probably played about 25 to 30 shows in the Nassau Coliseum. That would have been my guess. But then I looked at I looked it up, and it was 42 shows in the Nassau Coliseum. So it was the Dead's biggest stomping ground behind the Philly Spectrum in Madison Square Garden in the Northeast. So it's an important building in Grateful Dead history, obviously. So the Nassau Coliseum first came into existence 1972. First evening there for a crowd was the New York Nets of the American Basketball Association, but its most famous sports legacy is obviously the New York Islanders, who played there for many years, and they won 4 Stanley Cups between 1979 and 1983. So that's probably definitely besides what the Grateful Dead did there, the other big legacy of the Nassau Coliseum. But getting back to the Grateful Dead, they played there almost from the beginning. 1973, they played 5 shows. So you got everything from every show from 1973, pretty much you could attach the word great to. All the shows in the Coliseum, but 5 shows in the Nassau Coliseum that year. Pretty amazing. 3 in March, and September 7th and September 8th in 73. Then there was a little break before they returned to the Coliseum. They came back in 1979. And once again, they brought some special stuff to the Coliseum that year. In January of 79, January 10th, in the same show, they broke out Dark Star and St. Stephen. So it's obvious that this place meant something to them. The first time they played Madison Square Garden was 1979. So up until this point, the Nassau Coliseum was the big venue in the New York area where Deadheads got to see the Dead. And also it had a parking lot scene, which Madison Square Garden didn't have. So Coliseum had a couple of cool things going for it, even though there's nothing like Madison Square Garden. Nassau Coliseum got the same type crowds and a lot of the same energy, so it produced many great shows. In 1980, the Dead played 3 times in the Nassau Coliseum, and a CD was captured from those performances, Go to Nassau. It was put out many years later, but it's a great representation of those shows. The famous South Fear from the May 16th, 1980 show is in that collection. Hot Jack Straw Franklin's really a great 3-night run. 1981, they had another 3-night run there. They played in May. My first Grateful Dead show was May 8th. Not my first in the Coliseum. This was my second show, was May 8th, 1981. If I could do it all over again, I would have caught the one on May 6th, which was an all-time great one, the best of 1981. Great first set. And in the second set before drums, After He's Gone, which they dedicated to Bobby Sands, who had recently passed away from the hunger strike, they went into a caution Spanish jam. and it's 15 minutes of some of the hottest improvisation they created that decade. So that made that a very special show. 1982, there was a pair of great shows there, especially the April 12th, 1982 show, which I dig a lot. The played there 84. I saw those shows. 1985, March 28th, 85 was a great show. Opened up Truck Stack, Truck Stack. I guess you could call it Truck Stack in a way. It's trucking into Smokestack to open that show, man. It was probably the best show of that 3-night run. And that was the last time I seen them was that those 3 nights in the Coliseum in 1985. Of course, they came back in 1990. They had the amazing Branford Marcellus show where he played that Eyes of the World, which is probably in my opinion, the greatest performance by a special guest ever with the Grateful Dead on the stage. What Branford does on that Eyes of the World is just mind-boggling. And they also did Dark Star that night and Hot Estimated. And I'm not an expert on a lot of 90s stuff. I didn't see him as much during that period, but they played a lot of shows there, in the following years. That's why I didn't realize they had played 42 shows there. So an amazing history of the Nassau Coliseum and the Grateful Dead together. And I wasn't at the Dead and Company show they played there in 2019. If I was, I would have known about this history a little better. They put a banner up to honor the Grateful Dead for the 42 shows and the 2 that Dead and Company had played there, the most by any artist ever in the Nassau Coliseum. And one other thing here about the Nassau Coliseum, a little personal thing. I went to see an Islander game there in 1980, and Mike Bossy, my favorite player, scored 2 goals late, became the first NHL player to score 50 goals in the first 50 games of the season. It was the freaking coolest live event I was ever at in my life. On the ride home, my friend Seymour put Europe 72 into the tape deck, and that changed my life. It was much bigger than the amazing sports event I just witnessed. And I heard that, the Cumberland and the Jack Straw. It was like I heard another world. Now I kind of understood why people love the Grateful Dead. So it was leaving the Nassau Coliseum that I actually had my first revelatory Grateful Dead moment on the way home. Europe 72, introduced to a new world of music there. And one other Nassau Coliseum thing, I saw my first rock and roll concert there the year before, Jethro Tull, and I tried pot for the first time. Didn't get high, but it was a memorable time. Yeah, the Nassau Coliseum is just an amazing rock and roll history there, because Madison Square Garden had the Rangers, the Knicks, a lot of events, all kinds of things going on there. So many bands in the 70s and 80s, especially before the Meadowlands was opened up in the around 1983. So many bands. The touring stop was Nassau Coliseum, so it's really a great rock and roll building. I'm not sure what it is right now. The Islanders moved to a new building, and it's kind of in a state of decline, which is unfortunate. Not as many concerts there. But what an amazing history. Grateful Dead, rock and roll, Nassau Coliseum, New York Islanders, perfect together. The last show the Grateful Dead played before their East Coast Fall Tour was on Jerry Garcia's birthday in 1973, Roosevelt Stadium. So the Nassau Coliseum September 7th show kicked off the tour. They opened up maybe a little cautiously to get going. Promised Land opener, Get the Sound Right, Sugary, and then Mexicali. And then the 4th song of the first set is where it really starts, where things start clicking. The always infectious, uplifting 73 Love Each Other. The upbeat tempo of that, man, it's beautiful. I think if you took a poll amongst Deadheads, and most of them, I think, would prefer the 73 version to the slower version in years later, starting in 1975, 76. But either way, it's the song's incredible. But that '73 version, there's something about it's just distinctive. When you hear that, you know you're listening to a '73 show, and it puts you in the right mood. I think the post '73 Love Each Others, probably the best versions are the Jerry Garcia band ones where Melvin Seal's playing organ, and they get that real funky sound down, which reminds you it's not as quick as the '73 ones, but it kind of brings you back to that the spirit of those '73 versions. So after this nice Love Each Other, they go into Jack Straw. And man, Jerry is picking on this. You know, the Jack Straws obviously the jams weren't as long as they would be, you know, when '77 and years after come along. But Jerry's guitar playing is so attentive. It's really a great Jack Straw. And then they go into the first Wake of the Flood number of the night, Road Jimmy. Hypnotic. As always, Road Jimmy delivers that hypnotic, unique Grateful Dead feel. And it's the first song of the night from what will be their new album, Wake of the Flood. Wake of the Flood came out in October 15th, about 6 weeks after this show. And moving on after Road Jimmy, we got two songs, Looks Like Rain and Deal, which were becoming mainstays in the first sets of Grateful Dead shows. Two interesting songs to look at because as the years rolled on, 80s, 90s, Looks Like Rain Deal would often be a first set ender. And Looks Like Rain pretty much remained the same through the years, not much change to the structure of the song. For me personally, it got a little boring. I find it, you know, sometimes I skip Looks Like Rain. There's so many Looks Like Rains on so many versions through the years. But when I heard this one from the Nassau Coliseum, you know, it took me back to how much at one time I loved this song. It's such a great blues tune, and this song, there's no overblown, overdramatic. They just got really down to the nitty gritty, the heart of it. And Garcia, man, he just hits at the end of this Looks Like Rain. He goes off, but the whole sound, it's there, man. It's like this is what the essence of the song. Which anytime a band plays a song 400 or 500 times over several decades, it's hard to keep the same feel as when you first launched it. And Deal kind of had the same problems, saying it was facing the same thing. Garcia loved Deal; he played it all the time. But what happened in 1981 that makes it a little different, or I think maybe the first version is 1980. They added a second jam to the song, and eventually became a set ender. So Deal actually became even a better song, a more desired song, because it had such a great jam at the end. It was a showstopper now at the end of the first set. But in 1973, it's still hot. You know, they got the nice jam in the middle. So just interesting that those songs came back to back and how they evolved through the years. And then the El Paso follows, and really the highlights of this first set are the last two songs, Bird Song and Playing in the Band. This is such a beautiful Bird Song. Once again, like the Love Each Other, it's kind of unique to 1973. I mean, they were playing Bird Song since 1971, but to me, it's like the essence of the 1973 sound, and probably because it was the last time Bird Song, there was a long layoff from Bird Song they played it in the Winterland in 1974 one time, but basically it came to an end in 1973, and Birdsong didn't reappear till they did Reckoning in 1980. Then it came back into the rotation full time, and what a great song! It had a 7-year rest. Maybe Looks Like Rain could have benefited from a 7-year rest and been revitalized, but hey, this Birdsong is incredible. One of the best ones. I love it, man. And Jerry singing and the playing, and with the two jams as opposed to the one longer jam from the 1980s versions and 90s versions. Truly, such a unique sound from this period. A unique Grateful Dead song. And to close out the set, playing in the band, which was pretty regular for 72, 73 in that era, but it never disappointed. It was a different trip every time. This version, Jerry's going off early, but I love the way Phil and Billy, their playing is just incredible in the middle. They take it in different directions, and this is a totally satisfying version, even though it's only about 17 minutes. I know as we get into 73, 74, you're looking at some 30, 40-minute versions. I think it was in Montana. They played a 45-minute version of playing 45, 46, something like that. I think pretty much if you do it right, 10 minutes of playing in the band works pretty good. Like they did in Europe 72, those versions were the first really standout versions. Europe 72, and then you got Veneta 1972, which is about 20 minutes, and 72 was the year for playing in the band. They just hit it 1,000% like every time. And hey, but regardless, this version's great, unique. It's doesn't sound like any other version of playing in the band. Definitely worth checking out. The Nassau Coliseum crowd was feeling it at the beginning of set 2 as they charged towards the stage, and Jerry Garcia asked the crowd to take a step back, and then the band broke into a beer barrel polka. Whenever this happens, whenever they ask for that step back and they do a little tuning, a little instrumental tuning, usually leads to chaos in the form of great music. Just a couple of examples of where that happened. Obviously, before the second set of Cornell, they do the take a step back thing. In Englishtown, before the monumental Mississippi half step, they do the take a step back. And I think it also happens at the Rochester tape was another great half step. But it seems whenever they would ask the crowd to take a step back, it's as if they knew something amazing was about to happen. So after the beer barrel polka, Here Comes Sunshine to open set 2. One of the great numbers added to the repertoire from Wake of the Flood. Most of these songs came into the Dead's rotation on February 9th, 1973 in Palo Alto. These songs, it was a change in the songwriting strategy of Hunter, Garcia, and Barlow and Weir. They went from the old weird America. That's a term coined by Grail Marcus describing the music that Bob Dylan and the band created in the Big Pink House and Sargadees, and I love that term, Old Weird America. Whenever I hear it, I think it best fits what the Grateful Dead had been doing in the early 70s with American Beauty, Working Man's Dead, Europe 72, all those tunes that were linked together based off folk tradition, Tennessee Jed and Jack Straw, the characters from Another Time and Place, and the Cumberland Blues, and all that great stuff from that period. But now we're moving into a new period, equally as brilliant and important as that period. It begins with the songs of Wake of the Flood. I think the Grateful Dead just said, "Hey, we're going to create our own new, whatever you want, our new idea of how songs, our new concept of how music should be," and it's totally Grateful Dead related songs that were built to be played live. You take Eyes of the World, Mississippi Half Step, songs that could just easily, great songs, but songs that were built to be expanded live with jams, whereas some of the songs from the previous era didn't quite have that flexibility to it. And then you're moving on from Wake of the Flood. You got Mars Hotel with Scarlet Begonias, and then you got The Fire on the Mountain and Estimated Profit from Terrapin, Shakedown Street, all these great classic Grateful Dead songs that just screamed out the essence of what the band was now about. A more upbeat, where the music and the lyrics led to live performance, more so than the past songs, but everything linked up together well. But there's definitely a shift when they went from Europe 72 to Wake of the Flood in the songwriting attitude of the of Hunter and Barlow, and the overall musicianship of the band. So it's an interesting time. 1973, definitely a turning point. So we start off with a excellent version of "Here Comes Sunshine," but every version from 1973 is excellent. And once again, they played this once in 1974 in the Winterland, and then this was dropped until, I'm not looking at any stats here, but I believe it was 91 or 92 when the Dead brought back "Here Comes Sunshine." So that was a long break for such a great tune. So they play it really good here. It opens set 2, great way to get things going. If you're an enthusiast of the song "Here Comes Sunshine," I think, in my opinion, by far the best version. There's a lot of great versions out there. Cleveland, December 6, 1973. And there's a lot of ways to find this music, but if you'd like to hear that version, I have a YouTube page, Positively Garcia, where I upload what I feel are great versions. That's in there. Here Comes Sunshine from Cleveland, 12/6/73. It's like 17 minutes long, and the band's just going on, and Garcia's just ripping it, man. So that Here Comes Sunshine gets me psyched, man. Every time I bring up the song, I think of that version. Then set 2 rolls on with a couple of songs, "Me and My Uncle," "Good Loser," and then the big moment, "Let It Grow" is born. I am Black Dirt, Live Again. This is such a great debut version of of all the songs. I can't think of a better debut version. First time playing it than this "Let It Grow." They would play Weather Report the following night, where they would do the whole prelude. But if you listen to this "Let It Grow" out of context, you would never guess that this was the debut version. And for such an intricate song, they're hitting, Weir's got the lyrics right, the timing's perfect on all the intricate changes in the structure of the song, the jamming, and the outro jam is where it's at on this one, because Garcia's ripping, and it sounds like the song's landing, and you're like, hey, that's a hell of a version. But then it kind of dwindles into a little space. Then Weir kind of revives it. He's riffing, playing some leads. Garcia picks up on it, and he blows away what he just previously did as far as a jam. So it's like a two-tiered, brilliant jam at the end, at the outro. It's one of the best ones you'll ever hear. So yeah, a favorite "Let It Grow" of mine for sure. And then it eventually segues into "Stella Blue." So you get the Wake of the Flood songs back to back. So in the first part of this second set, you're getting "Here Comes Sunshine" and then "Let It Grow" into "Stella Blue." And actually, Europe 72 was a great triple album of all the live stuff. And I'm not sure why the Grateful Dead didn't follow that kind of thing here with "Wake of the Flood." Obviously, they went into the studio, cut a good studio record, but the live versions are just a different story, especially if you look at "Mississippi Half Step" and "Eyes of the World." Much better live than were recorded in the studio. They did the best they could in the studio, but it's not the same thing. So it would have been interesting if they could have done a double album with the "Wake of the Flood" songs. But anyway, moving on. Good version of "Trucking." A lot of great jamming. Garcia's on a roll here tonight with everything he's doing. Goes into a nice drums. Billy's just kicking these drums. This is really like a nice 4-minute. It's not your typical truck and drums other one. This is like a real top-notch drum solo. Billy, my God, these guys were just so great in 72 and 73 and 74. And then it goes into the other one. And Weir just didn't feel like singing the lyrics. Or just it didn't reach the right peak, but it's a good 15 minutes of jamming the other one, and you're fully expecting to go into the other one, but it never happens. It just kind of, I wouldn't say dissolves, but then as it slows up a little bit, they're like, okay, time for "Eyes of the World," and everything makes sense once you hear how good this "Eyes of the World" is. It's like the other one was a warm-up almost for the eyes of the world. That's how good this version is. So they're all fired up at this point. Eyes of the World, the first couple of verses can't even contain the excitement and the energy coming through the music. Garcia's ripping, and here I think I missed one important point of the show. More than usual, Keith Gottschalk is playing electric, Fender Rhodes, and in this show it sounds incredible. There's like so many different points where I hear Keith playing that, and I'm like, damn, I wish he would have done this a little more in '73. I know he switched to it pretty much in '78, but when he did play it in '73, it was like choice points, and you're like, yeah, that sounds great, and it really stands out, and it really seemed to ignite the band overall. And so the Eyes of the World, you're cruising through the first couple verses, everything's flying high, and just this outro, like the last 10 minutes of it is all jam as we know. But this one is one of the spectacular ones. Between Keith's trading off with Jerry, and at the end, Jerry's just piercing, ripping leads for like 2-3 minutes. The repetitive, the leads that you die for, the Glenn Gary leads. So Jerry had it going on this night. And for me, this is the third greatest Eyes of the World. There's two in 1974 that I might give a slight edge to. The Roosevelt Stadium one on August 6, 1974, and the Winterland, the one in the Grateful Dead movie, which they didn't show the whole thing in the movie, but the whole thing, that 18-minute version is pretty great. And I probably put this one third. But sensational Eyes of the World. And there's one more song to go, and boy, they don't let you down on this one. Sugar Magnolia. And previous to, only in the last year or two, did I realize how great this Sugar Magnolia is. So that they're ripping up the Sugar Mag, beautiful sounding. They get to the jam, and Garcia, once again, his taste. The band's rocking out the rhythm. The place must be going nuts. Everybody's bouncing off the floor of the Nassau Coliseum. He decides not to jump into the jam right away. The band just like savors the beat of Sugar Magnolia at the beginning like no other version. And just like the joy, the simple joy and pleasure and celebration of Sugar Magnolia. And Jerry's going to rip it because he's been ripping all night. And when he jumps in, it's just like, my God, you put your hands up, I give up. But Jerry's ripping. And then once again, Keith with those, playing the Fender Rhodes there, man, he chops in with some great notes that sound great. Kind of creates like another level for Jerry to jump off of on the Sugar Mag, and just ripping, man. And then they bring it to an end. They don't do the rhythm as much at the end, but it's like they did it more in the beginning, where they pound out the rhythm of the Sugar Mag. But a great version, and this was a sweet spot. 72 to 74, the best Sugar Mags. I think you got to look at November 1972, Hoff Hines. 73, man, that I think it's UCLA, 11/11/73 as one of the most ridiculous Sugar Mag jams. Cleveland, once again, getting back to that Cleveland 12/6 show. One of the Winterland shows has a great Sugar Mag from 74, but it was such a great time. Like almost any of the versions from that period you pull out, you're blown away how good they play that. And the Grateful Dead complete their mission in Uniondale, Long Island, by closing out with an Around and Around encore. It was a tiger of a song back then in 1973. So the reelin' and rockin' conclusion, perfect ending for a great night in Grateful Dead history, as so many nights were. The Eyes of the World, the first Let It Grow, Birdsong, all this 73 stuff that's so unique to that year makes this such a powerful show. All right, so make sure you pay homage to this great show on its 50th anniversary. And that's it for episode 6 of the Deadology podcast. I'm your host, Howard Weiner. As I mentioned earlier, I got that YouTube page, Positively Garcia. Lots of good, great cuts on that page. My website, tangledupintunes.com, and you can find all of my books on Amazon. Thanks for listening once again. I'll be back next week with something interesting. Peace out.
Thank you. We're going to take a short break. We'll be back in just a few minutes, so everybody hang loose.